Good morning. And, as usual, a short note on the following entry. This is not a traditional buyer's guide. We are not writing here about the pros and cons of individual car models, but only about potential, most common problems. This does not necessarily mean that every fault will occur in every copy, but there is an increased risk of such an event. Let's start. The BMW i3 body is made largely of CFRP, carbon fiber reinforced polymer, so you don't have to worry about corrosion. Worse, if the vehicle has an accident, if it's our fault and we don't try to get decent auto insurance, it can hurt financially. In addition, some cars, mainly from the beginning of production, but not only, had faulty airbags. They should have been replaced long ago as part of a service campaign, but people interested in buying a BMW i3 should check this. Electrics and electronics can cause problems. The connected drive system and multimedia in general are faulty, and software updates often did not improve anything. In some cars manufactured in early 2018, mainly those equipped with an additional combustion engine to charge the traction battery, so-called REX for range extender, there were cases of faulty electric engine control systems, specifically faulty printed circuit boards. If the fault is revealed, the car may suddenly lose most of its power or even lose drive completely. These systems were also replaced by BMW, but as in the case of airbags, it is worth checking whether the given model was subject to a service campaign and whether it was carried out. Although many BMW i3 owners complain about poor suspension comfort, this issue is not usually related to faults, it's just that this type is like that. However, it should be noted that many owners of these cars report problems with the steering system. The first failure is actually a minor issue, albeit a nuisance. It's a loud squeaking sound when turning, related to insufficient lubrication of the plastic elements in the steering column. All you need to do is lubricate them thoroughly. BMW even has a suitable agent for this purpose. Its catalog number is 812323277735. A DIY enthusiast can handle this on their own, or you can take it to an authorized service center or another service center. The second problem is the loss of power steering, or weakening of the power steering. There may be several reasons for this, from the prosaic, such as too low tire pressure or lack of contact in the electronics, to software errors. Yes, it is worth turning the car off and on and maybe it will fix itself. It is also worth mentioning the tires. Not that their use was associated with increased damage, but with generating costs. Definitely. This is related to the fact that only tires of unusual sizes were used in the BMW i3. The basic one was 155/70R19 with a speed index of Q, up to 160 km per hour. It was used in the basic versions of the i3 and i3 REX. But if someone decided on a REX with better equipment, the rear axle received 175/60R19 tires. There were also 20-inch rims on offer. The front axle had tires in size 155/60R20 and the rear 175/55R20. Budget class tires are not much cheaper. They also noticeably exceed 500 Polish zlotys per piece. Although the maximum speed of no BMW i3 variant exceeded 160 km per hour, several manufacturers also offer tires with a speed index of T up to 190 km per hour. But that's another few dozen zlotys for one tire. And another problem. There's basically no way that any tire shop would have such tires in stock. You have to order them in advance, and in the event of serious tire damage while driving, you can only count on a tow truck. On the day of the damage, the BMW i3 probably won't be going anywhere. Some users complain about the braking system. This is generally a typical issue for electric and hybrid cars. If the car is driven gently and/or rarely, the brake discs may rust because the braking system is not activated during gentle deceleration. Energy recuperation is responsible for the speed drop. Most of these cars left showrooms in BEEV versions, battery electric vehicle, i.e., without an additional combustion unit worksaw. Although the unlucky ones had electric engine failures, it does not seem to be a plague. We should be more afraid of the previously mentioned faulty drive control systems. However, you need to be careful with the plastic. Electric motor mounts. They tend to crack, especially in situations when the rear wheels lose traction and then suddenly regain it. A shot of torque quickly damage the above-mentioned elements. They can be replaced with plastic ones, but more solid ones, or with aluminum ones. But in addition to that, you also need to update the software. which in similar situations will limit the torque delivered to the wheels after slippage. I would say that this should be the task of traction control, but okay. Although this sounds like an affordable operation, it does not have to be. Repairing damage caused in this way can reduce the i3 user's account by even a 5-digit amount, with a 1 or 2 at the beginning. Problems with the electric motor mount should not occur in cars manufactured after 2016. We also have the issue of the combustion engine in the Rex version, a 2-cylinder, 38 horsepower engine from the BMW C650 scooter was used here. Anyone who thinks that this is a German engine will be sorely mistaken. No, the unit marked W20K06U0 is a product of the Taiwanese Kimco. Unfortunately, the BMW i3 RX is loud, and when the battery is charged too infrequently, it is also fuel-hungry. It can, forgive the language, consume up to 8 liters over a distance of 100 kilometers, so it is better to remember to charge it. In addition, it is not very reliable. Sometimes the problems are related to the engine equipment itself, e.g., the fuel pump, and sometimes to the electronics. For example, there are problems with switching from purely electric to assisted drive. They can be so dangerous that the car may lose the ability to accelerate. What's more, in cars from 2014 to 2017, there were problems with the removal of fuel vapors. The cable that is used for this is adjacent to the positive terminal of the battery. As a result of unintended cooperation, damage may occur, which in extreme cases may lead to fuel leakage and a car fire. Of course, a service campaign was also carried out here, but it is worth checking whether the car has already been checked and possibly corrected by the authorized service center. There are no miracles. The older the i3, the worse its batteries usually are. This is particularly problematic in the oldest and simplest versions, which were equipped with 60 Ah batteries. Even when they were new, their range did not exceed 200 kilometers. Well, that's a big understatement. According to the NEDC cycle guidelines, no longer in force in Europe, the range was 190 kilometers. In reality, it would be a few dozen kilometers less. It would be if the traction battery was new or regenerated. In practice, some units may have a problem covering 100 kilometers on a single charge. Even cars with Rex are not very suitable for example, holiday trips. Versions with 94 or 120 Ah batteries should theoretically cover over 300 kilometers until the electricity and fuel run out, and you can't necessarily count on that after many years. It should be remembered that the availability of individual versions varied depending on the year. The BMW i3 Ah and its RX version was the only version produced in the first 3 years. In 2016, the option of choosing a 94 Ah battery appeared, also as BEV and Rex, and in November 2018, production of the 120 Ah version, also BEV and Rex, began. The i3's models, strengthened from 170 to 184 HP, were only available with 94 and 120 Ah batteries. The last issue worth mentioning is charging problems, specifically too slow charging. Usually, the problem is not in the car itself, but in the external charger. It is worth starting by checking a similar device, if you have access to one, or by driving to a public charger. The biggest problem is at the same time the most typical and expected one, the gradual wear of traction batteries, especially troublesome in versions with the least capacious batteries, 60 Ah. Such cars were withdrawn from the offer in 2017. Using the BMW i3 with a range extender can also be troublesome and problematic, especially since the fuel tank has a ridiculous capacity, 9L, except for cars from the American market manufactured up to 2016, there is only 7.2L available. The rest of the failures and problems, although they can make life miserable, are mostly no different from those of combustion-engined cars. So if the issues considered to be flaws of the BMW i3, including poor handling at high speeds, do not bother someone, the purchase can be considered. And if you know of any common errors, your comments are welcome.